I want to, the implications of this is that when you have this kind of tsunami type thing or seismic shift, it unleashes an enormous amount of energy. And I'm going to use the term energy because it's a little easier to talk about it that way. And so you have a whole nation of people. I was listening this morning where it says 75% of the people are not agreeing with anybody, that they are angry, they are frustrated, they are upset, and they are frightened. And when you have angry, upset, frustrated, frightened people, you have a dangerous situation on your hand because it's not clear where they are going to go. But you also have a beautiful situation on your hand because there once was a time people said that everyone is apathetic. Well, that's not the case anymore. There's an enormous release of energy. And the issue, one of the issues before us is how do we organize ourselves in order to catch that wind and it blows us to somewhere other than the places we're familiar with going. So there is a great opportunity and there is a great danger. I come out of a tradition of community building, and I want to use that because I think framing something and naming something are very important. How do we frame this thing? And I want to, without pretending to be able to analyze the whole situation, I'm just sharing my perspective on it as I have lived it and as I see it. And when I talk about community, I'm talking about a notion of wholeness and completeness and interrelatedness. That's what community means to me. It is, in my own way of thinking, anchored in some assumptions that we humans have the capacity to be community. Otherwise, there's no point in struggling for it if I didn't believe we had the capacity to be that. And that means transcending every obstacle that would make us not be community. And so I bring that this morning, and it starts with a stand. When you want to build community, you have to find some place to stand. And I want to suggest some features of community buildings and then talk about what we've done. I want to suggest that we have to stand with the most marginalized, the most abused, the most downtrodden, the most dismissed. And if I were using our book of faith, it would sound like the least, the lost, the lame, the leper, the beaten up, those who pushed to the side of the road and into the ditches of death. And so there's a language out here now called the middle class because the people I'm talking about are not included in that discussion. And so I want to say that that's where you stand in order to build community. And then you stand there not just in a way to denounce and damn everybody else, but you stand there trying to figure out and on the assumption that you're trying to stand with the least, but stand for the interests of everyone, even if they disagree with your understanding of what their interests are. That's where you have to stand, and that gives you a place to begin to work for a community. I want you to track with me a little bit here, and I think a feature of this requires humility, because the assumption might be that many of us know what we are doing and that we know how to solve this problem. And I've been around long enough, I'm 65 years old, that I've met so many people who knew how to solve the problem years ago. And yet the problem is deeper and more profound and more devastating than we have ever experienced. And so I have the good sense to dismiss that and know that we are on a road of discovering something. And I want to say that requires a little bit of humility. And humility means the capacity to listen if you're going to build community. Because in folk is something. And to hear the substance of people's hearts and to work with that in such a way that you walk people out of the darkness of separation and into the possibility of being in a meaningful relationship is the very foundation of community work. And so I just want to say that another feature of it is, and I've said this in different ways, interrelatedness. I've been doing some work with the migrant workers, Brother Baldamar Velasquez. And he called me this summer and said that I've never organized folk that I've not spent time doing what they do. And I said, well, that makes you a good organizer. And he said, so I'm going to organize the tobacco farmers, but I've never worked in tobacco. I don't even know what it's like. He said, so I'm going down to some place called Dell, North Carolina, and I'm going to work in the tobacco fields for a whole week. And I told him, I've been in tobacco fields. I don't know if you're going to make it a week at your age. But he went there. And there he was in that tobacco field. And when you get down low, getting those lugs, the temperature gets up to 100 degrees down there. And that's gritty and wet sometimes in the morning. And I came out, I found my way over there. And I got to the field. Somebody met me in a parking lot and took me back in the woods. And he asked me to pray with Mexican workers. And so I was standing there praying. And when I finished, somebody said, amen, in Southern English. And I knew it wasn't the Mexican workers. And when I looked behind me, it was the farmer who owned the farm, who had come out and caught us in a prayer meeting out there in his tobacco field. And at that moment, I felt that he was getting ready to come down on all of us who were out there. But we started a conversation. He had some water that he brought out there. And I just want to share this because I want to share that we have to seek new ways of being in relationship. And when I started talking to him, he said that he had a case of it with Reynolds Tobacco Company because they locked them into contracts, and those contracts are so hard and restrictive that he said that I might be open to joining with the workers in order to get my contract straightened out, because this period has created a whole new possibility of alignments. And if you are not open to that, if you just see this guy as the enemy, and you come out there, and even if he's not acting like the enemy, you'll make him the enemy anyhow because you bring that to the conversation, then I think that we're thinking about another period. I hope you're tracking with me a little bit here in terms of being open to something. And that has to do with creativity. That I want to suggest to you that yesterday's thinking and yesterday's analysis, while it has applicability, you can't transport that wholesale into the current moment because it requires us to be creative and to put together the pieces of analysis that we are making in ways that might suggest a direction that we've not yet even conceptualized. And so I just want to say these things to you as someone who's been out here doing community organizing. Now, having said that, as somebody in a city and in a state whose work has been organizing, I see several priorities, and I want to name them. One is I think it is strategic for us to build black-brown unity. Two, I think that any people where 1/4 of your people are tied up in a slave system, in a criminal justice system, and you can go to any court on any Monday morning and see hundreds of beautiful young black people, 7 or 8 generations down from slavery, standing there, being prepared to be loaded on a bus and taken off to a modern-day slave camp. Youth have to be a priority. And all of this discussion about a gang and gangs and so forth has to be reassessed. And we have to figure out how to engage that. And third, I think that there is something deeply flawed in the makeup of those who have been reared in the United States. And I don't want to exempt the rest of the world, but somebody else has to speak on that. I have authority in terms of the United States because I have seen the madness that's been carried out and normalized after a while. And so people who steal other people's land, somebody said, we didn't cross the border crossed us, and take that land. And people who would take the Native American people and take their land and culture and then to put them on reservations and march them as they did, and what do they call it, the March of Trail of Tears, off to some distant cold place where 1/4 of their people die, and yet these folks think that there is something special about them ordained by God. When you start to think that way, you're a dangerous person.